Welcome to the Real Estate Syndication Show. Whether you are a seasoned investor or building a new real estate business, this is the show for you. Whitney Sewell talks to top experts in the business. Our goal is to help you master real estate syndication. And now your host, Whitney Sewell.
This is your daily real estate syndication show. I'm your host, Whitney Sewell. Today, our guest is Eric Nelson. Eric co-owns an engineering company, but is looking to transition to real estate full-time. Eric's been investing in single family and small multifamily for years. After learning that partnering is the best way to accelerate, Eric made the shift to multifamily and partnered with the right people. Eric also has a podcast called The Real Estate Mindset. Eric goes into a few different things that I know you are going to learn a lot from today, but how ultimately he moved fast in this business and really that transition, right? From JOB, but a business is another business, but it's still a JOB to him, to transitioning to real estate full-time, how he's doing that, how he's educating himself, even hiring a coach, different things, the partnership, how he did that. But also just how it was tough to scale, right? And why they moved into syndication and even just taking so long to get into the first syndication and just that the challenge of having patience, right? We talk about it often as well. Plan to do it for, 1 to 2 years, before you really see a ton of results. Are you ready for that when you get started? Well, he goes into that today and breaks some of that down. And I reference a book I want to go ahead and share too, just 5 Feet from Gold. I've honestly not read the book, but I've heard great things about it, but just talking about, quitting right before you've made it. And so I hope you're encouraged today. And I hope you're encouraged to keep going and not quitting when it gets difficult by what you hear from Eric today. Eric, welcome to the show. Man, I've enjoyed getting to know you a little bit. I know I was on your show just recently and looking forward to the listeners even looking your show up as well and learning more about what you are doing, because many of them are trying to do the same thing you've done, right? I mean, you've made that path to your first syndication and out there making it happen. I know we're going to dive into that a little bit, but give the listeners a little more about who you are and why real estate, why syndication?
Yeah, no doubt. Well, Whitney, thanks first for having me. Love the show. I'm still blown away that you can do it daily. It still surprised me this day. We talked about that a little bit on my show. My name is Eric Nelson. I'm the founder of Wild Oak Capital. And yeah, we're basically, we've got our first syndication about ready to close. So it'll be interesting to kind of talk about that. But the path to here is a long one. So I'll try and be somewhat brief, but it's funny, like I was in college and I had this kind of just feeling, maybe because I'd seen other people around me, hey, we should buy a house. And so my brother and I kind of we bought this house, and this was in 2007 or so. So it was super easy to get a loan. I mean, even as college kids, we got a loan, but anyway, we kind of house hacked, right? So we rented out some rooms, it helped us afford our house. We fixed up the house. So that was kind of my first foray into real estate. And then my wife and I, kind of similar. We owned our house, we had a little extra cash, and I was thinking, wow, we should just buy a rental. And that's really as far as we took it, because we didn't know what we were doing. I didn't even know how to analyze a deal. I just thought, as long as we can cover the mortgage, that was basically the extent of the math I did. So we did that. And then a friend of mine tipped me off some podcasts and some other avenues to really learn how this business works. And it was amazing. I mean, I just kind of dove feet first, like a lot of people, you just kind of all right, I love this. Let's figure it out. And it was cool to get truly educated, understand what it looks like. And so from there, we bought a 6-plex with a really cool owner finance deal. And we bought our current house, which is a 3-plex. And it's a similar situation where the owner financed it. And so we're kind of getting creative because essentially we didn't have all the capital we needed to do that. But then, like a lot of people, we realized, well, it's really tough to scale. Because to find those kind of creative things or, whatever it might be, was very difficult. So we ended up partnering on one more deal, and I finally said, okay, we have to scale faster. And so really figured out syndication is kind of the way to go if you want to scale as fast as you can. And so that's, again, kind of dove right in. That's a little bit my personality, for better or worse. I'm going to really dive in and go 100%. So that's kind of awesome. Like the 30 second overview.
You mentioned truly educating yourself. What does that mean? How did you do that?
Yeah, good question. I mean, I think podcasts like yours. I mean, you can gain a lot of knowledge from listening to podcasts. And I think for me personally, it was more of like, oh, they said this. What does that mean? And I'd go find a book on it. Like Joe Fairless's book, in my opinion, it's a little dry, but it's an outstanding book. If you really want to know kind of ins and outs of syndication, there's a handful of other ones out there that are like that. So I'd say podcasts, books, and then really, probably one thing that really helped me was I hired a coach. And he'd done it before, and really kind of learning from his path and just having the avenue to ask questions, because you kind of don't know what you don't know. And then as you get into it, you're like, wow, what does that mean? Or what do I do here? And so to have someone I could really bounce ideas off of as a true mentor, for me personally, that was the best way. Everyone has a different path, but that it took me, 10 different avenues to really learn it, I'd say.
No, that's great. You mentioned a couple of good things there. And even that book, I recommend it often, Joe's, but there's not many books on the syndication business, right? And Joe breaks down many things there that are, from the branding piece, right, to scaling to the actual, increment, just parts of the syndication process that you need to know, before you get into this business. Lays out all the terms, all those things, it's just a great book as you're getting started in the syndication business. I know Joe personally is a great friend, and couldn't recommend it enough. But you mentioned also, you hired a coach, and I recommend it all the time. I've had many coaches, that have helped me in many different avenues of business and life and even speaking, whatever. Right. That was a mindset shift. Right. For me, early on, I really felt like I got burnt by a coach many, many years ago, and didn't feel like I gained the value. And even then, looking back now, I kind of question, well, did I put in, the work that I should have? I don't know. But having a coach, like you say, having that person that's been there and done that, and you can ask questions to, boost your confidence level to all new highs, right? Having that person. But for me, I know early on, spending that money on a coach, I guess a few years ago, that mindset shift, I was like, well, I don't know, I could put this towards something else. We were going through another adoption process. We were expecting to have to come up with 50, 60 grand there. It's like, man, should we do this? Right. What about you though? How did you pick that coach, and why did you pick the one that you did and were confident in, spending that money to make that happen?
Yeah. A lot of things you said were absolutely true. So that I run into this all the time because, I kind of preach coaching. I think it's huge. And it is an investment typically, there's a wide range of things. So you also mentioned, you felt like you got burned. I think you really need to vet the coach. So for me, quite honestly, there's no other way to say it than I just got lucky. He kind of fell into my lap. So we were hosting a meetup together, and he just kind of invited me to co-host with him, got to know him a little bit more. He kind of mentioned coaching, kind of mentioned syndication. At that time, I was still kind of doing joint ventures, kind of smaller stuff. And truthfully, I had a limiting mindset myself. I'm like, I don't really want to partner unless it's like, my in-laws, which are amazing people I know, like things like that. And he kind of like dug away at me, to be honest. He was just sort of like, hey, I'd love to help you out. I think you could partner. And so truthfully, he kind of fell in my lap. Since then, I've learned a lot about it. And I think, I got really lucky. But if you're out there and you're listening to this, just do some research, ask some people, ask some other folks who've had that coach. And then, most coaches will do one free coaching session, which I highly encourage you to do, because then you kind of get their style and their feel. Really vet the coach. I wouldn't spend a huge investment without kind of trying it out first, and definitely getting some resource or some recommendations.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. I personally went to Bigger Pockets, found people talking about different coaches, and reached out to them, say, hey, would you mind to get on a phone call? Let me ask you some questions. That helped. In numerous different coaches that I was considering to just like say, okay, I'm not joining that one, or I'm not, partnering with that coach or whatever. But then going to conferences and actually meeting those individuals in person where they were speaking, getting to talk to them, that also helped me. I feel like to not make some bad decisions on specific coaches, but then asking for references was just absolutely crucial too. You said like, maybe partnering with him or I think partnerships is one way that you've scaled into syndication. Can you elaborate on that and that transition, that mindset shift as well?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's one of the biggest mindset shifts I've had. And so my podcast is called The Real Estate Mindset. And it's for that reason, because for me, I had to really change my mind before I could change really the actions. And so I kind of love this topic, but yeah, I mean, for some reason, I just had this thinking like I need to do it myself. And the other thing was I was like oddly embarrassed to talk about it for some reason. I just wanted to keep it close. And yeah, I was buying rental properties and maybe a few friends knew, but for some reason, I just wanted to keep it quiet. And that's silly. There's no reason to do that. And so that's why this platform, these type of things are so cool, because why not get the word out that this is the best wealth builder, in my opinion? Anyway, so I had this kind of shift basically to realize, oh, if I partner with people, I'll actually go there faster. And it took a little while. And the first time I did, it was incredible. So I have 2 partners on this first syndication now, and I could never do it without them, because you can bounce ideas. You know, if one of you is busy, you can say, hey, can you take this on? We have different roles. We have different skill sets. So, you know, partnering really does accelerate. Now it's the same as coaching, right? Bet your partner, because you could probably get in trouble if you find the wrong person. But with the right person who has complementary skills, it's just going to make it go so much faster. So it's a huge shift for me, absolutely, to realize that partnering is way powerful.
It's like a marriage, right? That's the way I look at it. I mean, it is like a marriage. You are connected to this individual. Even if later you don't want to be, you probably still own some projects together. You're still going to be connected, you know? So it's so important, but no doubt you can scale so much faster because you just can't do everything in this business, right? I mean, you just cannot do everything. And so you need other teammates who excel in other areas. And you should, if you want to do a good job for your investors. And so Eric, you know, you are, and we can't unfortunately go into a ton of details about this project because you know it's going to close approximately the same day this is going to go live. But just in case it isn't, you know, hasn't closed, and I assume it's a 506B deal, you know, we can't go into a ton of details. However, I still think you can shed a lot of light and help to the listeners who are trying to get to that first syndication. Some challenges you have had, and you know, let's jump in there.
Yeah, I would say probably the first thing to tell new, you know, potential syndicators is it takes a long time to get your first deal. Typically, you know, there are some folks out there who maybe partner with someone early on, maybe there's some skills, jump into a first deal, maybe get some GP points. But in my opinion, you really have to be patient and take your time. So that's really the first piece of advice, because as Joe kind of lays out in his book, you also really need to start raising capital long before you ever think you need to, because as I'm finding out now, it's a pretty challenging task. So get the word out, spread the word. Hey, here's what I'm thinking about doing. Here's what I'm getting into, you know, get people excited about it long before you ever think you need to. And then, you know, a couple of challenges would be basically patience, because I would say on average, I'm just kind of guessing here from what I'm hearing on my show, maybe a year or so. You start into this path, you're trying to get educated, you're getting some marketing, finding some teammates, getting to know brokers, you know, kind of all the stuff that leads up to the deal. And it just takes time. It takes time to build relationships, takes time to build your knowledge. So one of the challenges, I say the biggest challenge is just patience. Like, oh my gosh, this is a lot of money and a lot of time leading up to the first thing. Will it be worth it? And I think lots of people just walk away. You know, 6 months in, they say, oh my gosh, I've spent money on a coach, spent money traveling there, getting deals from brokers, but they don't work. You know, hear a lot of that stuff. And then, you know, along with that patience thing is underwriting. You know, I bet we underwrote close to 200 deals before we got this first one. And I think that's pretty typical of the market right now. So hopefully it's not always going to be that way, but you'll also find groups that overpay for stuff. And so, you know, one other challenge and one other thing is don't fudge the numbers. You just can't. So if it doesn't work, move on. And, you know, get back to the broker and say, here's where we are and here's why. And they'll understand. They also love that feedback. So, you know, the biggest challenge I'd say is patience and really getting educated, really knowing the field, really knowing what you're doing. Takes a long time. So that'd probably be my biggest.
Get your free copy of A Guide to Passively Investing in Commercial Real Estate. Inside, you'll learn the basics of passive income and real estate syndication, what kind of returns you can expect, how to find a sponsor, and how to evaluate the risks. Download your copy in the show notes or visit lifebridgecapital.com/invest better to start your investment journey. Yeah, no doubt. It's such great advice. People ask even about just starting a podcast, and has it paid off, all that stuff. And I say, man, whether it's a meetup or YouTube channel, whatever, or thought leadership platform, and clients I'm working with or mentoring, I say, hey, it works, but plan to do it a year before you see any results. I hope it happens in 4 to 6 months, but just plan on doing it a year, right? Before you see anything from it, just go into it with that mindset, knowing that. And it also reminded me of a book that I've heard of, and I have not read this book, but I think it could apply here. I've heard a lot about it. But it's called 5 Feet from Gold, right? People stop, right? They're 5 feet from the gold, and you just have to be willing to keep going. And really a year in the way you can scale in this business. It's a very short time period, right, of your life, considering the impact that it can make. I could have easily quit it a year, and we're really not feeling any success at that point, and nearly killing myself and family trying to make it happen. But I'm so thankful we didn't quit. And so, was it your mentor though, Eric, that helped you to really understand that and to move forward quickly, and to help to keep you motivated, or to help you, to remind you that you need to be patient? Or was that your spouse, or was that, how did you stay patient and keep going, to now get, to get to this first deal?
Yeah, I think it's a little bit of everything. So, I asked you a question on your show, or on my show, basically what do you attribute your success to? And, I was thinking about that question after that, and mine is basically everyone around me. I'm kind of this pawn sort of thing, but I bring it back to my 2-year-old. He loves doing puzzles, but they have those inset ones where he'll spin them as a tractor and he can match it, and he's pretty good at them. But a true puzzle, he wants to try so bad, but he can't do it unless I say this piece goes right here, and he'll spin it around, put it in, and gets all jazzed. That's kind of how I feel my life is. Everyone around me is saying, here's this puzzle piece. And then I just have to actually push it in and do a little bit of the work. So it's basically been my wife, mentor, coach, friends, family, kind of pushing me along the way. And it comes similarly to me with the podcast. I think my 25th episode aired. So that's about a half a year, because I'm doing it weekly. And a friend of mine called, and he finally said, hey, your podcast is finally sounding good. So he was like, he's finally saying, hey, you're getting some traction. It's, you're getting good at this interview thing or whatever. But the point of that story was to say, everyone around me has kind of supported me, and I've known it's going to take some time. And that's why I give that advice, is if you can go into it knowing, okay, this is going to be an investment. It's going to be investment in time. It'll be a sacrifice in many ways for my family. So I just say basically my success and being patient is really to credit to everyone around me. Yeah.
No, great answer. No doubt. So important who you surround yourself with, personally and professionally, in every walk of your life. And what's been the biggest challenge for you, Eric, getting to this first deal? Anything else that really stood out to you other than patience? I know you mentioned that, but anything as far as learning the business, or raising the money, or getting the financing, or finding the deal, what were some of those difficulties?
Yeah, it's funny. Basically all of those, right? So every piece that you just said, it comes with a challenge. So I think raising capital, similar to what I was describing, people tell you it's difficult. I think for me, what's been challenging is, we're in raising capital now. I think it'd be okay to talk about this because the fund or the opportunity will likely close before this airs. But, you talk to friends, you tell them about it, and they say, yeah, I'm super interested and I definitely want to invest. And then you send them the basically click now, wire money thing, and then get cold feet. And I don't ever want to push someone into something that they're not comfortable or super knowledgeable about doing. So I'm always like, that's what's good for you. That's what's best for you. But you kind of in the back of your mind had this punch to the gut, basically oh, that's X number less than I had expected to raise. So that was, and still is an ongoing challenge, is kind of just saying, you can't force someone. You shouldn't force someone. They really need to be aware of the risks and all those things. So that was a challenge. Another one I think is broker relations. And I think, this business well. Your relationship with brokers is so key, and it takes a long time. There was a handful of brokers I called, especially in really competitive markets. One guy just flat up hung up on me. He's like, hey, take me off your call list, and hung up. And it's funny. Later, I talked to him about it. He's like, "Oh man, I'm sorry. I got so many spam calls those last few weeks." But all that to say is, it takes a lot of effort and energy to get there. So the challenge would be, really getting brokers to take you seriously, really understanding what underwriting looks like too. And that I credit back to my coach again too. His name's Jens Nielsen, so I'll give him a shout out. But really understanding kind of the ins and outs. I mean, if you talk about cap rate, I think a lot of early investors understand that, but cap rate versus X cap rate and why the exit cap rate is different than your entrance, how to be conservative. There's just a ton that goes into it that but it's difficult to learn on your own, and it takes some time. So the challenges of really understanding, relationships, raising capital, branding is huge. Really kind of this thought leadership platform like you've got going, Whitney, it's a lot of work, and they all come with their specific challenge.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Appreciate you elaborating on numerous things there, even going back to your coach. And I know Zen's a great guy for sure, or been in a mastermind with him for a while. But what about anything that, now you're at this first deal, you're in the middle of, getting to the closing table now, but, we've talked about it taking a year to make a lot of this happen or longer. And what would you have done differently? Now that you know what you know, looking back, anything that you're like, man, if I had done this thing, it would have been so much better or whatever. What would you have done different?
Yeah, I think, again, hindsight's 20/20, but I really would have gotten the word out as fast as I possibly could. Don't be afraid to post on social media. Say, hey, if anyone's interested in real estate, reach out to me, and just really talk to your friends, family. There's no reason to be afraid. There's no reason to say, hey, I'm not an expert yet, but I'm headed this direction. So I would probably have put the word out, I guess, sooner than I did, because I think raising capital will become easier the sooner people know what you're doing. So that's probably a huge key, is just, dive in. And then, what I did was basically I spent a lot of, I drive quite a bit for my job. I'm an engineer and I drive around. So I listen to a ton of podcasts, but I would have spent even more time getting educated early, just really read books, listen to podcasts as much as you possibly can, and get the word out. It'd basically be the two pieces of advice. And what's challenging about what I'm saying right now is those are kind of early on in the process. And so if someone's listening, say, man, I have to do all that stuff so fast, so soon. The other piece of advice I would give is, you are where you're supposed to be. So be okay with the process, and be okay with, I'm probably a few months out at least, don't have my website up or whatever it is, all those things along the way. It's just part of the journey. So, this is kind of a mindset thing too, is just enjoy that journey. It's not like you rush as fast as you can and you're not sleeping to try and get the first deal. It's it's kind of all part of the process, and you get to know people and go to conferences. I've really enjoyed the process. And I think it's partly due to just taking some deep breaths and saying, there is no true finish line in this business. If you think there is, you're going to be surprised, because I would always have this mindset of oh, my website's ready or my podcast's ready. And eventually I was like, you know what? You'll never be ready, because there's always the next stepping stone. Like with you, you're in this fun process, and I can't wait 5 years from now. Hopefully I'm in that same zone, but I want to enjoy the process between here and there as well.
Yeah, you said that well. It is a never ending thing, right? And you have to learn to enjoy the process. What about, you're in the middle of this deal. How do you prepare for a downturn?
Good question. I think it comes back to really conservative underwriting, and then really educating your investors to understand what this investment looks like. If there is a downturn, the most likely scenario is we hold that property until the market turns back. So I think those are the two keys, is basically really understanding your rents and the market, and then being on the same page with your property manager, which we haven't even talked about on the show yet, but huge piece to this puzzle is a good property manager. And then really being very, very clear to your investors. Hey, this, we're projecting a sale in X number of years. A lot of these are 5 to 7. However, if the market takes a dive, we might have to ride out that storm and just keep collecting rents, keep paying bills. Once the market's back, then we can really exit. And so I think, that's what I love about multifamily too, is there's a risk, of course, but the reality is likely the market's going to bounce back. You may not sell exactly when you think, but that's actually a huge key just in general. Just be very transparent, honest with your investors. There's no reason to dupe people. This is an awesome business and a great way to grow wealth. So just be clear. Hey, there's risks involved. We may not have the exit strategy exactly dialed, but that's really, in my opinion, the way to prepare is just to say, we'll sell when the market's right.
Yeah. I love you're stressing transparency and, which is so important, right? You want your investors to know up front, here's some things that could happen, whatever. But it also, what you're saying there, what I hear is like, man, we're putting some options in there, right? We're not bound by this, this one or two things that, that we have to sell by this time. You're putting options in there and you're even being transparent about that to your investors. Could not agree more. So important. What about your best source for meeting new investors right now?
Oh, awesome question. I was actually kind of asked to join Jens's meetup. So we talked about him. He had this meetup going locally. And after a couple, it was clear he needed a little help just with logistics and stuff. And so I just kind of stepped in and said, hey, can I help you? But if you don't have that situation, there's not a meetup, start one. And if there is one, go there and start talking to people about what you're doing. So for me, I honestly didn't believe how powerful meetups are. They're awesome. And then there's a ton of ways out there to meet people. There's a ton even online. So even if there's not one local and you don't want to start one, meetup.com, you'll find some out there. I've found, local meetup to be a great place to meet investors. And then what's interesting too is once you start talking to people, that they'll kind of introduce you to their friends because you're providing this opportunity for them. So I would say number one way for me is just being vocal, but also like showing up to meetups and things like that.
Awesome. No, that's great. Got to get out there, right? You got to get out there and let people know what you're doing. And what about any daily habits that you are disciplined about that have helped you achieve success?
Yeah, I'm pretty diligent about exercise, and everyone's a little different. But for me, mostly for me, it's really riding a mountain bike. I live in Colorado. So, I get on my bike most days. And if I exercise, I tend to just have better work habits. It's kind of this meditative process for me. You and I share a similar faith. And so I have kind of this prayer habit. A handful of those kind of things, people talk about miracle morning. I definitely think there's some huge power to that. And on my show, we talked about waking up early. I wake up before my kids, which is huge. They're 2 and 4. So it's kind of a super fun circus when they wake up, but really kind of set your mind right before the day starts. And whatever that miracle morning looks like for every person is different. But for me, it tends to work. So really it's exercise, being up before everybody else, and really kind of focus on the future every day.
I love how you said, I kind of have this prayer habit or a praying habit. I love that it's a habit, right? It just, it should be the first thing to our mind. Yeah, it's just praying. But, and I agree that, would agree with you completely about that. I also talk about the Miracle Morning. It was one of the first books that I read many years ago that started to change like how I at least thought about my morning. I also do not do everything in that book that they say. However, it did just make me think about how I'm using that time and getting up early and just that consistent action, right? Every day. And at that time for me, it was early in the morning. If you had to pick one thing though, that's contributed to your success in getting to this first deal, anything, what would it be?
Yeah, we touched on it a little bit. I think honestly, it's not one thing. It's basically the people surrounding me and my faith. So I would kind of attribute those two things. Basically, having that prayer and saying, is this where I'm supposed to be? Is what I'm doing? And just kind of sit in that, and listen. So that's huge. And then the other thing would be my friends and family around me. So again, it's like, I love the analogy of the puzzle with my son. It's like, people are kind of just handing me that puzzle. I have to push it in. I have to do the action, but everyone surrounding me, mentor, family, friends, wife, my wife's amazing. Those really kind of, I don't really take a lot of credit because it's a lot of people kind of helping me push that puzzle piece in.
How do you like to give back?
Good question. So I love to give back in two ways. One with time. I volunteer quite a bit. I'm actually headed to Mexico to see a close friend who's a missionary, and they have a really cool thing going. We should talk maybe offline about that. Just love to give back basically to missionaries that I know, and then local organizations in my hometown. And that's two reasons. One, I love to be connected to the community, and two, I love to give back. And so one more piece of advice, I don't want to dive too far here, is give along the way. Because you hear the people say, "Oh, once I have $1 million, I can afford to give," or "Once I have X number of salary, I can afford to give." And chances are you can afford to give a little along the way, and it creates that habit. And I promise you, it feels better than you think. So, don't wait to give. That's kind of my one piece of advice: is give your time, give your money. And it's, Whitney, you're just a huge proponent and a really amazing person in that realm. And so a lot of people look up to you for that. And I think, you gave along the way for sure. So anyway, just a piece of advice for listeners as well.
Well, that's great advice. I appreciate the shout out as well. But if you're not giving now, you're most likely not going to give once you have that $1 million. I love how you said, like, building that habit of giving in now. It's so important. So important. Yeah. And I appreciate you elaborating on that. Eric, thank you for your time today. Great guest. Just congratulations to you for getting to the first deal, right? Getting the first syndication. And now you're in the middle of it. You're raising that money. You're just watching that date on the calendar, right? When that closing date's going to be. I'm often doing that as well. I was like, what day of the month is it? And
no, it's crazy because it's kind of like this time is coming and we're trying to make this raise, and they're like two trains coming at each other, and they have to hit in a good way. So yeah, pretty excited. But Whitney, I can't thank you so much for letting me be on your show. Yeah,
honored to have you on, Eric. And tell the listeners how they can get in touch with you and learn more about you.
Absolutely. So if you go to wildoakcapital.com, or you can email me, eric@wildoakcapital, or you can look up my podcast, The Real Estate Mindset. Really, all that stuff kind of lives in the website. So I'll just say wildoakcapital.com. I truly love to connect with people. Obviously, I can talk real estate all day, and this is kind of what I love to do. So love to touch base with any of your listeners.
Thank you for listening to the Real Estate Syndication Show, brought to you by LifeBridge Capital. LifeBridge Capital works with investors nationwide to invest in real estate, while also donating 50% of its profits to assist parents who are committing to adoption. LifeBridge Capital, making a difference, one investor and one child at a time. Connect online at www.lifebridgecapital.com for free material and videos to further your success.